on the Chevy Chase Citizens Board to discuss the details of how we are going to accept questions on this. Then we're going to turn it over to Austina Casey of DDOT to give us a description of this project, and Wayne Wilson will be adding details. And then after that, we will pose questions that you, either that Shelley or I have, or that any of you watching have turned in. And then after that, if we have time, if any of you watching this have questions about other DDOT projects in our area, you can ask them. And Austina and Wayne are not necessarily in charge of those projects, but we can see if they know anything about them. So that's what we're going to do tonight. So I'm going to ask Shelley now to tell us about what the ground rules are for this session.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you, Austina and Wayne, for being here tonight. We really appreciate you joining us on this very important topic and sharing all of the work that you've been doing at DDOT. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm chair of the Energy and Environment Committee for the Chevy Chase Citizens Association, and I'm excited to be talking about environmental issues in our community. For tonight, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your questions, your thoughts, any concerns that you have. Please put them into the chat, and I'll serve as the moderator for those questions. And anything that we don't get to tonight, we can send those off with our DDOT representatives, and hopefully they can either find responses to those or bring those to the attention of the correct people. I see our attendees are shooting way up, so we're so glad to have you all participating in this event tonight. So thank you, Ted. I'm going to turn it back to you now.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. And again, for those of you who just joined us, we're about to start a discussion about I think I'm correct, a 10-year-old project to rehabilitate Broad Branch Road in our area, which is a major undertaking by DDOT. And so again, for those of you who just turned in, we're going to hear from Austina Casey of DDOT, assisted by Wayne Wilson of DDOT, and send your questions to the chat function, and we will ask them after we hear the presentation. So Austina, we're turning it over to you.
All right, I'm going to try to share my screen, and then I'll take it from there. Can you see the screen? Oh, wait, share.
Not yet.
Okay. How about now?
Okay, here we are.
Okay, let me start the slideshow. Okay, can you see the slideshow? The slide?
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, hello, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. My name is Austina Casey. I'm the Environmental Program Manager at DDOT. I support the development of the environmental assessment for this project with Wayne as the project manager. Wayne will introduce himself. Wayne, you want to go with introduction?
Yes, how you doing? I'm Wayne Wilson, project manager for the rehabilitation of Broad Branch Road.
So today's agenda will cover the following. We will give you a project overview, which will include the project location, existing conditions, purpose and need. And then we will move on to the environmental study and talk about the roles of the key agencies, resources along the corridor that were given environmental considerations, and alternatives that were developed. Then we will dig deeper into the preferred alternative and talk about factors that went into selecting the preferred alternative, the description of the preferred alternative, and then based on comments received on the EA, we'll show you some of our design options that we're considering to address those stakeholders' concerns. We will quickly go over the summary table of the environmental impacts of each alternative. And then finally, we will go into next steps, and then we will open it up for discussions. Next slide. So as the map shows, the project area is 1.5 mile segment of Broad Branch Road from Linan Avenue down to almost Beach Drive. Majority of the eastern part of the roadway borders Rock Creek Park, which is owned, operated, and maintained by National Park Service. On the west side of the roadway, we have clusters of residential homes, including properties that serve as diplomatic residence for sovereign nations. So as has already been mentioned, this project began nearly 10 years ago. Some people argue it's longer than that, but the initiation of the project was prompted when DDOT identified several conditions along the roadway, and these include uncontrolled runoff from the elevated parcels and across the roadway, which had led to the deterioration of the existing roadway, as well as impacting water quality in the bodies of waters in the area. At night, there's poor lighting, and the lack of lighting has created some safety concerns. Also, there are, oops, sorry, let me go back. Also, there are no pedestrian and or bicycle facilities along the roadway to provide safe access to and from the park. Finally, despite being rural in nature, the roadway is a major cut through for motorists and results in speeding and larger than expected traffic volumes. So based on these conditions, DDOT was able to refine the purpose and need for the project, which simply put, is the purpose of this study is to rehabilitate Broad Branch Road Northwest by correcting the poor road conditions, improving drainage to better control stormwater runoff, and provide facilities to accommodate the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists. So the proposed action, which is to rehabilitate Broad Branch Road, is considered a federal action. This is due to the fact that federal funding and permits are required for the project, as well as potential impacts the project might have to federal lands. Therefore, an environmental study in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, is prepared. DDOT's role is as applicant of the federal action. Because this is a transportation project, FHWA is the decision maker and therefore the lead agency. NPS, as administrator of the Rock Creek Park, was invited by FHWA to be a cooperating agency in the NEPA process. Under NEPA, FHWA determined that an environmental assessment will be prepared to document the NEPA analysis and the process. In October 2013, FHWA and DDOT published an EA, which was followed by a public hearing for the EA the following month. Since it had been 7 years, over 7 years since the 2013 EA that FHWA published, FHWA and DDOT decided to release a revised draft environmental assessment on October 16th of 2020. FHWA wanted the public's input on changes that had been made to the document as a result of comments received on the 2013 EA, as well as our coordination efforts to address those comments. FHWA has determined that the decision document will be a FONSI, which is a finding of no significant impact. DDOT is currently working on finalizing the EA and preparing the FONSI. So going back to the EA, in preparing the analysis and developing the alternatives, considerations were given to the environmental impacts to resources in the project area. Some of the major projects include, some of the major resources include Rock Creek Park, which is a federal land as well as a historic resource. Water quality in both Broad Branch and Rock Creek has been degraded over the years due to the uncontrolled runoff that we mentioned earlier. There are several cultural and historic resources, including the historic stone wall that line the Broad Branch Road, historic trails and bridges, and stone boundary markers which delineate the park. The roadway also goes through a variety of land uses, including residential neighborhoods, embassy residence for 5 different sovereign nation parks, and several community facilities. Although these created, altogether, these created right-of-way issues when developing our alternative, as you'll see later on. All right, so in developing the alternatives, these were the alternatives that we came up with. So in developing those alternatives, existing conditions, the purpose and need, and impacts to resources were factored in. Additionally, DDOT held meetings with resource agencies and the general public to solicit their input. We looked at different ways of constructing the roadway, including various lane width, different types of gutter and curbs, sidewalks with varying width, protected bikeways, stormwater management, and of course, green spaces. So the no auction alternative and build alternative 2, 3, and 4 were evaluated and presented in the 2013 EA. In the interest of time, I will not go into detail about those alternatives. However, we did receive many comments on them, trying to take into consideration the major desired features received in the comments, such as wider roadway and incorporating bike lanes. DDOT was faced with a challenge given the limited amount of city-owned right-of-way. Therefore, a modified build alternative 3 was developed, which then became the selected preferred alternative in the 2020 revised draft EA. So I'm gonna focus on the on how the modified build alternative 3 became our preferred alternative that FHWA selected. As with any preferred alternative, it had to meet the purpose and need. Also, it has to be feasible. It has to be feasibly implemented. Again, the challenging right-of-way constraints was that although on the northern end of the project, the district right-of-way is as wide as like 90 to 120 feet. On the southern end, however, it was limited to 30 feet in some areas. Trying to accommodate all of the desired features would have required DDOT to fit a 50-foot wide facility into a 30-foot available right-of-way, or otherwise impact or encroach on NPS land, sovereign nation land, and those sovereign nations specifically were Italy, Peru, and Malaysia. For 5 years, that is from 2013 to 2018, DDOT, through the State Department, on several occasions approached the foreign embassies for the additional right-of-way needed to widen the roadway. We even prepared a report summarizing the impacts to their property and the right-of-way during that time. We're looking at ways to minimize the impacts while still accessing the right-of-way. Unfortunately, those negotiations were unsuccessful. We received letters from the embassy via their attorneys stating they would not want us to encroach on their right-of-way. This effort was the main reason for the 7-year delay in releasing the document to the public. And with the release of the 2020 revised draft EA, all 3 embassies asked us to confirm in writing that our proposed action was not going to encroach on their or result in any impacts to their right-of-way. So eventually, DDOT had to develop an alternative that would not encroach upon any sovereign nation land, which is the modified alternative 3. The preferred alternative, modified alternative 3, allows for no widening to occur on the west side. However, on the east side, DDOT was able to negotiate with NPS 7 narrow slivers of land that were part of the Rock Creek Park, each less than 12 inches wide. So I will have Wayne go through this slide. This is the design options we're looking at, we're considering in the final EA, based on a lot of the comments that came back on the 2020 EA that was recently published.
Okay. So as Austina said, there was a lot of comments and a lot of push for bike lanes, and it's kind of the reason why we investigated the option and met with State Department for many years, and even did surveys on the embassy properties to confirm if the right-of-way lines were correct. So where we had the widest right-of-way, which is kind of north of 27th Street, which is between the land and 27th Street, we are in the document including the option of a multi-use trail. So where you see the bio-retention that is 10 feet wide and the sidewalk 6, we have the option to go up to use that bio-retention for a multi-use trail, so we can have both pedestrians and cyclists in the northern section where we do have the widest right-of-way. Unfortunately, below 27th Street, it does get tighter, and it drops down to 33 feet. And is the next first property is the Peruvian Embassy, which is one of the letters we had to confirm that we would not impact their right-of-way or their property. We were unable to continue the multi-use trail that way beyond that. But in the northern section, we are able to add a multi-use trail for pedestrians, cyclists, and just have a wider, more options for people. If you want to continue on to the next slide.
So then, so just summarizing the environmental impacts, the highlighted column is the impacts from the preferred alternative. As you can see, all of the build alternatives do meet the purpose and need. However, with the right-of-way issues, not all of them can be implemented. So, and you could see also from the table that the right-of-way, except for alternative 2, is actually less that we will be needing for the preferred alternative. Other benefits to the preferred alternative is the fact that there are, using less impacts to Rock Creek Park. This project, the major sticking point, as we pointed out, is the right-of-way. So, we're trying to not encroach on the foreign nation, and then trying to minimize our impacts on Rock Creek Park. And overall, the preferred alternative is the one that has done that. And with some modification, we feel we could still accommodate a lot of what the public is requesting of us. So moving forward, our next steps is to complete the environmental process, meaning that we publish the final EA and the FONSI and have it approved by FHWA by the end of March, which is looking pretty good. We got our legal sufficiency on the document from our Office of General Counsel, and we're going to move forward to sending it over to FHWA for signature. And then hopefully begin the final design in spring of this year, and then move into construction beginning in the fall of 2023, pending any funding, I think. Wayne, do you want to talk more about that?
Sure. As we move forward with construction, and as within the current situation we're in, as we are reallocating funds due to the current pandemic, we will look at how what money that recently was given for potentially stimulus, how that falls into when the completion of the design happens, and the funding availability at that time.
So yes, that's our last slide, and thank you again for supporting this project and your interest throughout the years. And I guess we can take any questions now.
Okay, thank you, Austina and Wayne. Before I turn it over to Shelley, I guess I had a question just about what you just said. You, I think, described this a few minutes ago as a proposal. Who exactly still needs to approve the final details before construction, and are there still opportunities for public comments, or is that all over? Does anyone, is this solely in the district government, or was one of those agencies you mentioned a federal agency?
Well, the decision is FHWA's, and because with the we've received all of the comments on the documents. The comment period ended back in November of 2020. So we are moved ahead with finalizing the document. And as I said, it's gone through our legal review, and it's on its way to get signed. So at this moment, there's no opportunity for commenting on the project. We will continue to involve the public throughout the design phase of the project. Our policy in the district is to, and especially at DDOT, is to have public involvement throughout the project delivery process. So, the end of the NEPA does not mean the end of our coordination and opening up engagement of the public. So.
Okay. Well, Shelley, do you want to start? I think you had some questions, or should we first go to the questions that our viewers have submitted?
We've got a very active chat tonight, which is wonderful. Thanks everyone for submitting their questions. I wanted to first welcome Denise Jackson. Denise is the Ward 3 Community Engagement Specialist. And Denise put her email in the chat. So if anyone wants to reach out with additional questions, we do have an expert here that we can reach out to. So please check the chat for that information. I had a quick question that I was wondering if you could provide some information on. What is the process for moving forward? Will there be an RFP that goes out to for a company to come implement this project? And additionally, what are some of the risks that the project may face? Like, is there a chance that the project wouldn't be funded? You mentioned that this is a federal project. Is there a chance that funds would not be available for this project going forward?
Oh, so to your first question, we will put together a scope of work for the design, and then we would solicit that out to consultants. We would have evaluations, and we rate each consultant, and then we would contract and hire a consultant to start the design process. For far as, and that process for design would take up to a year and a half, because how long Broad Branch is, the amount of community engagement that's necessary for the residents that are there, to make sure their properties aren't impacted, and trying to coordinate with the embassies as well. But after that period, we're looking at timing of construction funding in 2023. The availability of funds, we have put this project in the call for project in our list. And those are, like any agency, they're based on priority of any emergencies that come up, any bridges deficiencies or any other deficiencies, but it is in our project for a call. And we are more ready to move forward in design. And, as we get closer in design, the funding is more secured as we are sure that the project is delivered. Then the federal government feels that we are more confident that the funds can be released because we're ready to deliver the project.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to the chat. Like I said, we've got an active chat tonight. So let me just find one about the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts. Have they made a recommendation about the height of the retaining walls? Any comments on that particular issue?
Yes, so during the initial environmental assessment, we did communicate and meet with the Commission of Fine Arts. And as through the design process, we will have to meet with the Commission of Fine Arts as well as the Historic Preservation Society. So some of the initial comments about the retaining walls was to make sure that they are keeping of what's the nature of Broad Branch Road, the aesthetics of how historically they looked, as well as that any retaining walls are kind of smooth and not jagged, so they don't stick out. So the character of the road will be very much scrutinized, and we have to communicate with the Commission of Fine Arts as well as a community of what pattern is fitting in this area. Make sure it's not a city-like, because Broad Branch is like no street in the city. It's totally different. So we have to pick materials that is keeping of what the surroundings need to be.
Great, thank you for that response. Another question in the chat is to please discuss whether DDOT has reached out via the new administration, State Department, to seek right-of-way from the attached embassies.
So even though we started communicating 2013 and 16, we were still in contact recently as of 2020 with the State Department to confirm, that we were not, encroaching upon the embassy property. So we have been in coordination even through changes of multiple State Department representatives. We didn't change through even the ambassadors or representatives of each particular embassy has changed over the years of meeting with them.
Are the embassies seeing the benefit of these improved roads to their surrounding areas? Are they generally supportive? Because someone mentioned in the chat that the embassies really have no reason to give up their land, but these improvements would only highlight the embassies.
And that's kind of the approach we took, that, we kind of sold it that, you would be able to, since you have a residence on Broad Branch Road, you'll be able to bike, you'll be able to walk and enjoy that the stream is there. It's nature, and it's something that will be great. And even with that, we went on site, we met at the embassy houses, and we toured and we did a report to show what the impacts could be and how we can minimize them and minimize as much as possible. And it was just that they said no, in a sense that, it would be too much of an impact, as well as the Italian Gatehouse just above Ridge Road is historic. So we went and actually measured how far we can get to the house. We measured the door, we measured the generator, the fence, the stones, and how close we can get to it from a historical presence and not impact it. So we tried from all approaches to try to get some type of, a yes or some type of way to move forward, and it just wasn't successful.
Great, thank you. That response is very helpful. Let's see. So another question in the chat here. Can DDOT explain why it has not decided to provide a bike lane on any portion of the 1.5 mile length, even where there is plenty of room for it? This gives at least some indication that bikes belong on the road, not just north of 27th Street where a multi-use trail is not adequate. but on any portion south of that.
So DDOT looked at in our last meeting with ANC 34G, question came up of if adding a bike lane in the water section. So we looked at if it would be better or beneficial to add the bike lane in the northern section or add a multi-use trail. We looked at, since DDOT is moving more for protected bike lanes for inexperienced riders to actually have that feeling of confidence or safety being off the roadway, we looked at the multi-use trail as a more viable option for inexperienced cyclists, so they feel safe and have the opportunity to, to at least utilize that portion. And I do understand that the cyclists would prefer a dedicated bike lane in the roadway, but just to serve more of the constituents, we decided to go with a multi-use trail, because with that trail, we can have the grass space and it can be a more safer rider for, like I say, inexperienced riders as well.
Thank you. The next question is about vehicle use. And it says, next to no pressure has been placed on cutting vehicle use, and no consideration of visual assets and visual quality ever comes into play. Was that a consideration, and how to reduce vehicles on the road?
I know DC is moving forward with the slow streets, and based on the classification of Broad Branch, it is a collector street. So its main purpose is to collect traffic from local streets to move the traffic. There hasn't been a look to kind of reduce traffic on Broad Branch, but maybe as a network, we are looking at how traffic is moving through different cut throughs, and different commuters are using the different roads to access the city. That is a common thing we get for other streets in the city, of how cut through traffic is utilizing the street, and to try to prohibit that. But it's more like a network thing we're looking at, and we do need the capacity of Broad Branch. So, because it has a trickle down effect to other streets that may not experience heavy traffic now, but we limit the traffic on Broad Branch, then you might see more traffic on your residential streets, which would, it's just, cause another problem.
Okay, so it's more of a trade-off.
Yes.
Of sorts. Someone else brought up the lack of the bike path, and the section, the biking section just ends at 27th with no place for bikers or walkers to go. Therefore, kind of a trail to nowhere. So
that was kind of our initial, before we came out for our last public meeting, we didn't have the option of a multi-use trail. So in our first release of the year, we didn't have multi-use, so it was not there. So we would kind of understand, because we were thinking that it would be a trail to nowhere. Mm-hmm. And kind of the request that we got out of the last meeting we had at the ANC was, well, at least install it in an area that you have room. And that was from Lene to 27th Street. So that is why we installed it as a request of the comments that we got, to just include it where we had the room. Because we had the same sense that it kind of ends at 27th Street, but
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, you can certainly see the challenge here with all of the different stakeholders that you've had to work with, and trying to figure out the best solution forward. Someone asked in the chat for you to please describe in more detail the impact of the proposed plan on views of the park from the road. How much and what kind of deterioration?
So for the existing road, we are kind of deemed to maintain the view shed of the park, because that is one of the impacts that we had to analyze, the view shed of the park. So if you're riding north, just above Ridge Road, you have the small culvert, the soapstone culvert. So the proposal of the design is to maintain the height of those retaining walls from a roadway perspective, so that when you're riding, you would not be obstructed seeing the trees, seeing the foliage. From your vehicle, you will not see a higher wall than that. So we're going to maintain that type of height from the roadway side so that, you know, the view is still maintained.
Great. And not to belabor the whole bike lane and 27th Street, but somebody did have a good clarification point, which is, would the sidewalk continue beyond 27th? So
Yes.
the bike lane would end, but the sidewalk would then continue beyond 27th.
Yeah, so the shared path would drop down to a 6 foot, 5 foot, about 6 foot width, just to accommodate pedestrians walking. Since we don't have the wider room to accommodate a multi-use trail all the way down to Beach Drive, we would reduce the size to accommodate pedestrians.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question mentioned is, to what degree has habitat and ecological stability been considered? Stream temperature, air temperatures, changes due to canopy loss, particularly with the forest loss about to occur in Soapstone Valley.
So we do have to do a assessment of with the National Department of Wildlife Association. So we have tried to identify species there. We are aware of there is a long-eared bat that actually, I think, mates in July sometime that we have to be aware of. But we are working with Department and DDOE and wildlife, as well as Army Corps of Engineers, to kind of make sure that we don't impact the stream bed, so that we don't disturb any ecological or habitats for nature. And as well as we also have to do assessment of the trees that we impact. So the bats are kind of part of those that we can't destroy the canopy, because like I said, Bar Branch has a great canopy. You can ride the whole thing, a good portion of it, and you could be in the shade. So for us, we will replace a lot of trees. We will that are invasive, but we want to maintain the canopy as it is and reduce as much impact as possible. So we will share that information as design moves forward. You'll get to see what trees are impacted, how the trees are being saved, what conditions they are in. And, because we work with the National Park Service as well for the trees that's on the east side of the road, to kind of get their assessment for how their trees are living, what's thriving, and try to replace and replant so that the canopy is still maintained in the future.
I just wanted to interrupt for 1 second,
Right ahead, Ted.
because some people may have joined us late, and just to tell everyone that if you have a question, you can submit it in the chat function at the bottom of your screen. We have a bunch of more questions, but we also have 20 minutes left. So if anyone missed that announcement and wants to ask a question, that we still have some more already that Shelley's going to ask in a moment. And additionally, if anyone has questions about DDOT related issues that are not involving Broad Branch, you can submit those also in the chat. We may have to submit those to other people at DDOT, but we have representative who agreed to take those. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of what was going on, but we still have 20 minutes left here before we adjourn at 8. So Shelley, why don't we continue with the questions?
Great. And thank you both for sitting through all these questions. We sincerely appreciate it. It is very active chat tonight. So, and thank you everyone for your very constructive and very detailed questions. Another great question is, how long do you expect the construction of the project to take? And any idea on the impacts that will have on the area during that period?
Well, right now, roughly we're expecting the construction to take 2 years. Mainly it will be phased in a couple of sections. So the northern section, maybe between 27th and Linnaean, and then the bottom section, maybe Beach Drive in the middle. The difficult part is going to be maintaining access for construction vehicles. We always have to maintain access for motorists, and access to driveways were already provided. Since the roadway is so tight between the in there. It would take additional time, additional phases to kind of make sure that we still allow people to get to their houses and we can still construct the roadway. We're expecting 2 years for construction completion, maybe 27 months at the most, but it's depending on how, the phasing occurs and what we can actually do. And since it also is residential, that limits us, hours. We can't have loud noises and disruption to people. So our hours of when we can work will have to be, closely monitored.
Mm-hmm.
Well, can I ask, it may not be obvious to people, does this basically mean that general motorists from our area cannot access Rock Creek Park for this period, or are there really a lot of other ways to access Rock Creek Park?
Oh, you'll be able to access most likely. So for us, we would phase the traffic in one direction. So maybe you'll be going north on doing certain phases, or you'll be able to go south doing certain phases. So we can have construction vehicles working on one side of the roadway, still allowing people to come and use the roadway to access their property. We may request that, limit traffic to local traffic only, so that, we can actually accelerate construction and make sure that the site is safe for the motorists who have to access the site. But we will be able to get to your residence or use the road, unless the only implication would be when we reconstruct soapstone culvert. When we have soapstone culvert, we will have to detour traffic because it crosses the creek, and we have to replace it and drop piles and lay the structure. So that will be a total closure for a period of time.
It looks like from the design that you're actually going to be putting in measures to control some of the flooding that happens on a regular occasion. Is that something you can reflect a little bit more on?
Yes, so we when doing this environmental assessment, we've been repairing Broad Branch Road multiple times. We had a lot of flooding. Actually, a resident gave me a video of how bad the flooding was, and actually, I think that one made the news.
Yes.
So we are, so flooding is a huge issue that we have to mitigate. So during the design process, we're going to study the hydraulics of how strong the stream gets and some of the heights of what frequently flood we get. We are passing a larger storm at Soapstone Culvert to open it, widen it up so it doesn't flood as much. And we will have to, analyze detailed spots along Broad Branch Road to the elevation of the creek to make sure if we can kind of get a bench or a difference elevation between the roadway and the creek for where we have problem areas of flooding, which will be something that as we engage, or actually the community can be a little proactive. If you have stories or problems like flooding of a particular area in particular residents, that will be helpful to us as we move forward to design. So, because when we go to survey, we might not see the storm that you've seen. It may happen at night, it may happen on Saturday. So, the public would be a great asset for what happens when we're not there, what we don't get to see.
Yes, and we do have a number of other comments about the bike lane. So we have a lot of bike enthusiasts, of course, and, a lot of people who are very concerned about traffic and looking to reduce the number of cars that are on this road. One question that came up in the chat was the numbers that were being used about how many cars are actually accessing the road are older. Has there been any effort to recalibrate those numbers and come up with newer numbers on cars using the road and see if they can use that new data for the basis going forward?
For the basis going forward, we will have the consultant to actually do a new study. So they would do a new traffic analysis of what is current far as motorists, volumes, vehicle distributions. So the consultant would do a new survey. We were actually, since the survey started 2013 and maybe 2011, we would go do a new tree assessment. We would do a new survey to confirm and see what has changed over the time, as well as do a new vehicle count.
Will there be any traffic calming measures incorporated, such as roundabouts aren't always traffic calming, but bump outs and things of that nature to make sure that there's a reduction in speeds on this road?
That will have to be studied since we don't have a wide footprint. Once we get past 27th Street, it's pretty tight. There isn't really the opportunity to do roundabouts because we need more area. Bump outs, potentially, we are changing the intersection of Brandywine. We are trying to make that safer and tighten it up because we have had comments and received complaints or questions about how safe that intersection is and making it more safe for pedestrians. And other locations, we are not allowed to make speed humps because of the classification of roadway and the need for emergency vehicles to access the roadway. But we will look at signage and enforcement and any particular nuances that we can use to kind of calm down the speeding for this roadway.
Okay, great. And on the path of safety, how can lighting be reduced to an absolute minimum in the park while still providing for safety? For example, if someone says, please don't make it like Adams Mill Road between Harvard and Irving with nearly 24 lights and a length of a block. So keeping the lights as dark as possible so as not to disturb nature and wildlife, but also keeping safety in mind.
So with a lot of a lot of projects in Ward 3 and 4, it's a lot of residential, and we're against the park a lot of places. So a lot of the times we're using, sometimes we use a different type of lighting. We have type 1 and type 2. And type 2 is a kind of more of an elongated light that kind of focuses on a roadway, as well as we use shielding on the back of the light, so there's no trespass of the lighting into the park. Because we have had meetings with groups like Dark Sky, if you don't, like Commissioner Madak with the lighting team. So we have looked at ways to mitigate any light transferring into the park, as well as the temperature of the lighting. If it is 3,000, it's 2,500, what temperature is appropriate. I know there's a big push to get away from the more bluish lighting to kind of get more warming tones. So kind of those things of trespassing, temperature, and as well as we don't want to overlight. We have done on other project we did in Oregon, we did a test, we did a pilot where we added a light we did a different wattage to kind of get an input of how the public felt. Was it too bright? Was it too dark? So, I mean, we have explored using those type of things to kind of give a sense of how the project will be lit.
Great. Well, someone is loving your answer to that, giving you some claps in the chat. Awesome on lighting, and encouraging DDOT to please continue to press for only what is needed. And it sounds like you're very aware of the impact that lighting has on nature and natural spaces. So that's wonderful too. We have gone through our questions in the chat. I was wondering, Ted, if you had any additional questions that you wanted to throw out there?
I don't know that I do on this, but we mentioned before the chat that there's another big project going on right now on Oregon Avenue, which is fairly nearby. And I know that's totally different from this one, but I think Wayne said you were generally familiar with that, but that project I hope will be completed long before this one will start, but because we're only in 2021, but could you just make a comment from what you know about how that project is going?
Yes, so for Oregon, they have completed phase 1, which is between Wise and Wise Road and Western Avenue, and they are moving towards phase 2. They are working at phase 2 now, which is St. John's up to Rittenhouse. For that project is similar, two lanes of traffic, 2 lanes of road. They will be completed before we start or start any type of construction. One of the things that I took away from that project is that early input from the community is great. If possible, if we can get some of the email addresses as well as any kind of comments, like you're giving now, that would be useful as we move forward, so that, you know, we can have these ideas of what needs to be done or what we have in mind as we come to our first public meeting, and as we engage with each individual resident, how, you know, how we can best meet those needs. We have had some residents already reach out to me, and I had a couple of meetings with a couple of them that they were sharing, you know, some of the things they were doing with their properties, as far as their fences and their driveways, and just sharing, you know, being proactive of how the design can meet with what they're already doing, as well as, you know, like I said, I like to hear if there's anything that if you're having any flooding or any issues or speeding, any issues. I like to know those things so that, you know, that we are proactive and we can already know going into the design, these are the things that we kind of need to look at and kind of tackle and change so that we, you know, we can make it a great project.
We did
Well,
have one more question come in. Oh, I'm sorry, Ted, go ahead.
We had another question here that was actually relevant to one that I asked a few minutes ago about general access to Rock Creek Park during this construction period. You mentioned that people who live there, who have property there, will still be able to access it, but someone asked the basic question that if you are not in that category, if you're just a motorist from somewhere else, the question is this road, Broad Branch, in this area going to be inaccessible to everyone else? Your question was, your answer was a little bit ambiguous on that. In other words, will there be through traffic during this construction period to Rock Creek Park, or no? Will it be limited only to people who have property there?
Yes, it'll be through traffic. I'm sorry to ambiguous. No, we're not going to be checking IDs to see if you live on Broad Branch or anything like that. So that will be through traffic. Like I say, it will be pretty much probably in one direction at certain times. So you can go north or you can go south, but we will always maintain one lane of traffic, except potentially when we're doing the bridge, Soapstone Creek Culvert. So yes, we will be able to access it.
Okay, thank you. Shelley, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I would just say, one additional question in the chat one final question. What about finishing Wise Road for more access? Is that scheduled? This is Wise Road. That a project?
For Oregon or for Broad Branch?
I'm not sure.
Broad Branch.
We may just need to submit that with Denise and see if there's another project that's going on. So that's it for our chats today. I do want to remind everyone that this was recorded tonight. We greatly appreciate our guests joining us from the District Department of the Environment of Transportation, DDOT. I work with DOE a lot, so we greatly appreciate you joining us. Thank you for your time. We have a couple minutes. Are there any final closing statements that either Austina or Wayne would like to just put out there?
But before you make that closing statement, there was one other question that just came in that I'll just read it because I'm not sure what it refers to, but the question is, will the walkway be continuous from 27th to Beach?
Yes. So the walkway will be continuous from 27th to Beach.
Thank you.
Provide pedestrian access all the way down to Beach Road. And you'll be going down to the Rock Creek. They have a parking lot. The park has the parking lot for Rock Creek Park has a little parking lot right there. I think that's right next to Western Ridge Trail. So you'll be able to walk down to the parking lot, either go Soapstone Trail or you can use Western Ridge Trail. So you will have access to use multiple trails there.
Okay, thank you for that. So we only have a couple minutes left. So as Shelley just said, if either Wayne or Austina wants, or both of you want to make a final comment before we sign off, now is your chance.
I don't have anything to add. Wayne covered those questions very well. I'll let him cover the rest.
No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come present the project and kind of get how the community is feeling and some of the questions. I would appreciate if you all stay involved, if we can still have, these type of meetings to, as we go into the design phase, to kind of make sure we capture everything and make sure that everything's kind of represented. So I encourage these in the future. If y'all could facilitate that, that would be great for us.
Okay, thank you. I can't promise. I mean, Chevy Chase citizens, we do like to have meetings on public issues. We would want to discuss this with the Advisory Neighborhood Commission, because sometimes they want to hold meetings that they can hold only part of a meeting on one topic, and that might be good. It sort of depends, I think, on how interested people are in the details. We've just spent an hour on it. We'll have to see whether other people want to spend an hour in the future. We may want to do that as we get closer to this. Time goes on, and I suspect that by the time it gets to 2023, unfortunately, a lot of people out there may have forgotten some of these details we just discussed and are probably going to want to revisit them. Shelley, do you want to say anything else, or should we, or shall I make a final comment?
One last item. I wanted to just remind people, if they could not see what was placed in the chat, that we do have a Ward 3 Community Engagement Specialist whose name is Donise Jackson. Donise can be reached at donise.jackson@dc.gov. And Donise is spelled Donise. Donise.jackson. Oh, there may not be, I'm sorry, my eyes are not great. I think it's Donise.jackso, JACKSO @dc.gov. And the phone number is 202-391-8764. Again, that's 202-391-8764. And we're so fortunate to have a Ward 3 engagement specialist. So feel free to reach out with any additional questions you may have. DDOT, we so appreciate you both being here with us tonight. Thank you for this very engaging discussion and wonderful presentation. And, for all the work that you've clearly put into this project. It's really just so exciting to learn about these new developments.
Thank you.
And before we sign off, a final thing, just the Chevy Chase Citizens Association, who we sponsored this program tonight. We have a website, chevychasecitizens.org. So take a look at that. We will try to post a link to the recording of this later. So if any of you missed it or want to go back and check something, that should be on our website. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that. Wayne, did you want to say something else, or are you finished?
I was going to add that Donise did correct her email address. There is an N at the end. It's Jackson. So she did put in her correct email address on there.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So Donise, DONISE .Jackson, JACKSON @dc.gov. So feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions.
And to make clear on that, she is the general specialist for DDOT, so you can ask questions of her of other projects in addition to, it's not limited to Broad Branch. So I think we've now used our whole hour here. Thanks again to Austina and Wayne for taking part, and to Shelley, and stay tuned. We will have further Zoom discussions sponsored by Chevy Chase Citizens. Watch our website and newsletter. Thank you, everyone.
Very much.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Thank you.